Hello! So today I'm going to be talking about Same Bed, Different Dreams by Ed Park. A wild, sweeping novel that imagines an alternate history of Korea and the traces it leaves on the present. This book has a lot going on, and I mean a lot going on, from wars, assassins, RPGs, K-pop bands, deep analysis of slasher films, and it even looks at the perils of social media. The book is made up of 3 separate narrative voices. Each narrative voice is sectioned out throughout the novel, so we get one narrative voice, then on to another, and then back to where we started. At first, each narrative voice seems vastly disconnected, but with all novels of this kind of style, with this kind of structure, as we progress through the novel, we start to get small little hints, small little connections, small little things tying them all together. And of course, with all novels of this style and this kind of structure, you're probably going to be drawn to one narrative voice over another, or maybe you will enjoy all 3 depending on how much you are interested or intrigued by the content. Right, let's attempt to unpack this pretty dense and experimental novel. In 1919, far-flung Korean patriots established a Korean Provisional Government to protest the Japanese occupation of their country. The government-in-exile proves mostly symbolic, though after Japan's defeat in World War II, the KGB dissolves and civil war erupts, resulting in the North-South split that remains today. But this novel explores a massive what if. What if the KPG didn't dissolve? What if they still existed now, working towards a unified Korea? So that's the kind of general idea of this novel, and we get glimpses into its effects and its impact through the 3 narrative voices. In one story, we start by following a character called Shin, who is an ex-writer and works for a massive multimedia conglomerate called Gloat. Shin comes into the possession of an unfinished manuscript written by the KPG. This manuscript is a mysterious revisionist history, tying together famous names and obscure bit players to the KPG's grand project. This manuscript is made up of chapters entitled Dreams, Dream 1, Dream 2, Dream 3, etc, etc, and that's where the second narrative voice of this novel comes into play. We are reading the manuscript that Shin is reading. It reads like an historical document, honing in on various figures throughout Korean history and looking at the impact of the KPG on Korean history. A recent comparison to how the manuscript is written would be Hernan Diaz's Trust and the first story in that novel. It's very dry, it's pretty much just the facts. And I know a lot of people really didn't like that first story within that novel. They just found it way too dry, there was no heart to it, they kind of switched off. I didn't mind that whatsoever. I felt like in Trust it set us up beautifully for everything that was to come. But yeah, just bear that in mind. If you're intrigued by this novel, those sections, yeah, they're very dry and they just throw tons of facts at you. That's not to say that the manuscript isn't filled with loads of fun and really interesting things that happen, especially the way that the KPG has tried to infiltrate or take control. We get characters like Ronald Reagan and Marilyn Monroe pop up and all those things, and trying to guess like kind of where the changes in history have happened keeps you on your toes as a reader. But yeah, just the style, it's very dry. The third narrative voice we follow starts with a character called Parker Jotter, a Korean war vet and a appliance store owner. Parker Jotter is also a writer and has written a series of science fiction novels that gain cult-like status. And across time, the science fiction novels written by Parker soon have a kind of impact on the various different journeys and stories taking place. And I think that's about it as far as sort of describing this novel and the different narrative voices. I mean, this novel also has a boatload, and I mean a boatload of characters, and it just throws so much information at you. So, what did I like and what didn't I like? What I liked that this novel is actually quite funny and that it doesn't take itself too seriously. With how dense it is and how much information it's throwing at you, it will be very easy to try and take its subject matter uber seriously, but it really doesn't. And yeah, I was chuckling at little things that popped up all the way through. The writing is solid with a breakneck pace. This novel doesn't like to linger, it just throws so much information at you, and I really enjoyed sort of being overwhelmed and trying to find the connections. I liked how experimental this novel was. It doesn't really hold your hand that much, it expects you to work as a reader. And finally, I really loved learning about Korean history, the history of Korea, and also the history of Koreans born in America. What didn't I like? Even though I love this novel's ability to educate me in a funny and idiosyncratic way, my knowledge of Korea is limited. And as this novel is telling us an alternate history of Korea, I actually found myself going, I don't know if what I'm learning is fact or fiction. Now, of course, this is not the novel's fault at all. This is my fault because I just don't know Korean history that well. Ed Park is probably doing loads of things, loads of little changes, loads of little like sidesteps throughout history that are really creative and really funny, but because of my limited knowledge of Korean history, yeah, those things aren't just working for me, or I'm just not spotting them. But unfortunately, due to my work-life balance at the moment, I don't have time to just get on Google and try and find out all the different things this novel is throwing at me and really figuring out what is fact and what is fiction. So I suppose this is me just saying to you, if you don't really know Korean history that well, you might be in the same boat as me. You might still learn things, you might still find it fascinating, but there might be a few things that are just going over your head. There is a section in the novel that covers America's history and the KPG's involvement within America, and I found this section a lot easier to spot where the kind of like differences were. Just yet again proving my ignorance and how I need to educate myself a little bit more on Korean history, because yeah, I knew a lot more and I was able to get a lot more things when it came to that section. Now, with a novel this dense and covering so much ground, it doesn't really have time, and I don't think the novel is trying to create deep connections to its characters, but it does have a lot of characters, a lot of histories, a bit of family lineage, all of that kind of stuff. But I must admit, with the writing style and the structure, it didn't really give me much access to character. I didn't really care about any of these characters at all. And yeah, I don't know, even in novels of this style, I would want something a little bit more to cling on to. So yeah, that's another thing that I wasn't a massive fan of. And the final thing I didn't like, and I think this is a bit of a big one, is that this novel makes you work really, really hard at kind of spotting the connections. And they do get easier as the novel progresses because those connections become bigger and bigger and bigger until the 3 concentric circles of each narrative voice all come together. However, I was expecting something. I don't know what I was expecting, but because I was putting in so much work, I was expecting when all these things finally tied together, I was going to sort of been blown away by, oh my god, how did Ed Park do this? Look at all these things connecting together, coming together. But I didn't get that. I was, in essence, incredibly underwhelmed. The journey and the work I put in just didn't feel worth it. Again, maybe this is just down to my lack of knowledge of Korean history. Maybe if I was a bit more educated on the subject matter, then the 3 different separate narrative voices that do converge, the 3 separate stories of story and history that are taking place, when they all come together, maybe it would have had more of an impact. But yeah, for me, I put in a lot of work with this one, and I tried really hard to sort of figure those things out. And some are really, really obvious and some not so much. But yeah, when I eventually got there to the sort of final quarter of the book, I don't know, I was like, I don't feel like that was worth... Yeah, I just didn't feel like it was worth it. Overall, I think this book is good to very good. And I think if you are a little bit more educated on the subject matter, it could be excellent. I just don't know. But for me, I had a good time reading it. Nothing more than that. So I'm going to give it 3, possibly 3.5 stars out of 5. So, have you read Same Bed, Different Dreams by Ed Park? And if so, what did you think about it? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Please let me know in the comments below. And as always, I want to thank you so much for watching. I hope you're well, and I hope you're enjoying whatever you may be reading. And I'll see you all on the next one.